I'm Paweł. And before I even go to my presentation, I would like us to pause for a moment. Do you think everybody sees the same screen the same way at the moment? It's kind of a rhetorical question at the moment. The question, disability or mismatch, accessibility and inclusion. Are they included in UX? I'm Paweł. I work in Dog Planner as content designer. Dog Planner is znany lekarz, Doktoralia, Janeda, and some other sites. My superpowers and starting points for this particular subject and what I'm dealing with is empathy, simple language and simple flow, simple stories. I hope I can live up to that today. I really care for inclusive and accessible design. My also superpower is that I'm colorblind. I will tell you why in a moment. Let us start with the first part. Is it disability or mismatch? Let's start with the definition. WHO 1980. Disability is the restriction or lack of ability to perform an activity in a manner or within the range considered normal for a human being due to a functional limitation or restriction caused by an impairment. Another definition, 2011. Disability is a complex phenomenon reflecting the interaction between features of a human organism and features of the environment society they live in. Here, surely, you must see something else is the focus and the word interaction, which is the key word for designers. Because in contrast of who we are, we can affect interaction all the time. Let us also start from how many people with disabilities there are. Often when we hear the word, we think it's just a margin, 3% maybe. And surely the clients are not people with disabilities. Let me mention the social definition of disability, where the focus is on what Alicia has just been talking about. Disability, physical disabilities, translate into all kind of temporary or situational states that we are under. Disability is not only a motion disability, it's also things connected with sight impairment, or simply blindness, as well as color blindness. Another thing, hearing problems, cognitive dysfunctions, dyslexia, dysorthography. All of that can exclude somebody. Now, let me tell you something more personal. Here's a beautiful cutout of the color blindness test. In this case, I cannot see anything on the screen. There are only dots and dots and dots. You can probably see a number here. But in this case, I'm excluded on purpose because it's a test. Imagine such combination of colors in your product and you exclude somebody. And this is not on purpose anymore. Talking about color blindness, during my meetings, my working meetings, we've got some kind of OCRs, summaries. Somebody has marked that green should be this, and yellow should be that, and red should be that. For example, the goals we haven't met. There's always somebody, oh right, you can't see it, let's change that. Nobody really cares about the impact, about the money, the volume of additional work that goes into that. And unfortunately, this happens when we are creating products and we suddenly say, wow, accessibility. I would like to tell you a little bit about why this happens. In UX work, we've got a lot of biases and they are obstacles. It starts with research, and we talked about it yesterday. Designing various objectives, we have assumptions, and they are not bad because they help us make decision quicker and move around faster in the thicket of information. And they are also for adaptation, but those cognitive biases are plentiful. We are going to focus on ability bias, and it's in the back of all of our heads, but we don't realize that, and this unawareness often causes exclusion. We assume all of our recipients and users are going to use the product the same way or have the same abilities regarding using the product. Another piece of this puzzle is the exclusion habit. Exclusion habit runs in our blood in the process as we grow up. And let me give you an example from my kindergarten. From the kindergarten, the author of the book, You Can't Say, You Can't Play, You Can See, she introduced a principle in her kindergarten when she noticed that some kids were excluded and they were the same kids over and over, and they take this exclusion with them throughout their lives. She introduced a simple rule that any game kids play can use the word you can't play because you don't have a proper tool, a toy, you are from a different group. It's too late to enter the game. And it turned out that kids are wonderfully creative in how those rules can be changed. But the problem in our grown-up life and this habit is that we never question status quo. We don't question that some fixed rules can be changed. We assume there are some rules of the game made by somebody, by management or the company owner, some pre-fathers of UX decided that's how you should do this and that. Another quote, if you know the book Cat Holmes, you've seen the uh, associations. Human interactions are full of mismatch, but people can adapt to each other as they try to communicate. It's a wonderful feature in general for human-human interaction. But if we translate it into human-computer or human application interaction, we see that something has been coded, and it's most of the time it's not adaptable, and it does not match and adjust to human anymore if we don't pre-plan it. The other part, accessibility and inclusion, how are they included in UX? It's a more practical thing. How we can do that for UX? It's a mem you must know from meeting. In the process, in the design process, we often have this temptation to jump to a ready-made conclusion. It's somewhere in our heads and we want to release the design. There are several stages, but I would add another one. And as in the previous presentation mentioned that accessibility has to be included early on. A couple of principles from inclusive design toolkit of Microsoft. Alicia also talked about it, so let me just go over them. So first of all, exclusion is not a work process. We are not conscious. So We need to recognize exclusion, and that's the key thing to allow us to ask proper questions to ourselves in the design process. Then we've got learning from diversity, drawing conclusions from diversity. It's a wonderful lesson. It can enrich our product, improve its usability. We simply develop and our product develops along. Then we think we are designing something for a very narrow group, like transcript for people with hearing impairments, but most of the time you can solve for one and extend to many. It's all scalable. So where do we start? More practical. And these are things we try to apply by try and error, like the dog before that was in the pilot cabin. We try to apply different solutions and not to approach a process that accessibility is just an element, but we try to test various possibilities. We start with research and discovery, but the discovery should include the perspectives of people with different mismatches, so to speak. Another thing you can do in your product is consult organizations and experts. One of such organizations are widzialni.org. In our case, some basic product flow analyzed by the foundation returned as a report that was 500 pages long, all errors indicated, and ready-made solutions of many problematic issues there. Another thing you can do is diversify your personas. Using persons from Gov.uk, so they are ready-made, or you can adapt your personas and expanding the range of people with particular features, such as my color blindness. Paweł can be a persona as well. 32, colorblind, not able to make sense of colors. Another thing, my content branch. There are some particular guidelines for content, but accessibility is interdisciplinary and we are all responsible for that. But it's worth using a simple language, apply inclusiveness and accessibility, and remember that content is not only what we see and not only visual aspects, but also something more. Let me tell you about that. Simple language, there are some tools that even if you don't feel strong. For Polish, we've got Jasnopis. For English, we've got Hemingway tool. They will help you to check what's the level. So the entrance point for reception of your content, so that you can include larger target group. Some hidden elements, another point. So remembering that the text, you can see it's not all. In Figma, for example, and other tools, it depends on what your design system looks like, but there is the H1, 2, 3 headlines level, and H1 is the largest one. Recently, we have introduced a change in our design system. We changed the names. It's not going to be H1, H2, H3, because this should refer to the structure of content and not the font size. They are two different things. Another case is avoiding male-female forms, using personal forms instead. This includes more people in our target. this also increases the engagement with the product. You avoid asking for gender. Quite often, we've got categories very simple: male, female, men do this way, female somewhere else, and we forget other options. So it's good to step back from that because it's a binary approach and it's not up to date. Another thing, for people who need to use screen readers when you're typing anything in the internet with hashtags, use capital letters for every word because it's going to be received much easier. The next thing, there are various approaches here. As in Polish, we need to change forms for male and female forms of the words. So in our product, we try not to use complicated forms, so no underscores, slashes, and so on, and just write two forms, male and female, or just change the perspective and use the personal form instead. That is gender neutral because the screen readers cannot interpret underscores, cannot interpret slashes and other characters like that. Web content accessibility guidelines were already mentioned here, so I'm only drawing your attention to previous principles mentioned and including people into the process. So it's not just dry fixing the mistakes indicated in the report, doing something only for screen readers, for example, and automatically. Let me tell you something about testing. So the screen reader is something that seems difficult, but it's accessible. And if you have Mac, you can even use 2 clicks to open it. In the case of Windows, it's a little bit different. There are some screen readers you can install and test your content on that. Surprisingly, the effects are incredible. I would like to encourage you to do it early, at the early stage of design. When you check the main page of your company, it's good to test on a little excerpt you have at hand in the testing environment and implement the changes in the product immediately. You can test a few things such as color and how people see color. There are several plugins for it. In my company, I use Contrast, for example. It's another example that it helps the people with sight impairments, but it also affects my color blindness. When it's something in contrasting colors, I can deal with that. If it's pale and wrong colors, then I'm done. Let's move on to some advantages of inclusive and accessible design. Just a few points. Accessible design will increase the range and base of your potential clients. It will increase loyalty of users. A person who can finally use some product will fall in love with the product and they will not look any further because it's always some effort and risk to find something new, so the loyalty increases. It builds brand equity, and it of course matters a lot when you're talking to business. You follow legal requirements. In the US, in Canada, you can already be sued for not following the web content accessibility guidelines. Last year, Paweł was talking about it, as I remember. Oh, I just lost my train of thoughts here, but okay. In Germany, employees can turn to employer not to use software that doesn't follow WCAG and is not adapted to it. But the magic date of 2025 is when there are European regulations going into force, and European law is going to go closer to the state in Canada, in the US, where you can be sued because your software is not accessible.
Pozytywny wpływ na całą też
There is the positive effect on CEO.
wszelkie działania związane ze
All kind of accessibility increases optimization.
Ciekawostka tutaj. Byłem przekonany
What's
od początku,
interesting
że
is
źródła są wpłyną feminatywy, jeśli
I was convinced that feminine forms are going to be bad for optimization, but it's not. Google does well with optimization, and it increases the diversity of content. Moreover, some internal benefits.
wczoraj u Michała Redy z Wojska
Michał Reda
podkreślą to,
was talking about it yesterday.
pracownicy
The
zaangażowani
employees who are engaged
mają dużo lepszą wydajność i
produce much more efficiency,
praca nad
and
dostępnością
working on
jest
accessibility
taką wartością,
can be this value
zwiększy
that
zaangażowanie pracowników
increases
wokół tego tematu.
employees' engagement in the
Z
subject.
mojego doświadczenia
And
zaskakujące, jak
in my
często
experience, it's surprising
ludzie wokół
how
mnie
often
mówią o
people
dostępności
around who
i
I talk to about accessibility say, wow, why haven't I thought about it before? And they are not individual people, one in the product team, but it's a large group of people. They're enthusiastic, and just let's use this enthusiasm to do something good. And finally, is it included in US? We ensure that everybody gets the same user experience. I would like to repeat and emphasize that we need to remember for the product to be for everybody and not to narrow down as we do our products to average user. Thank you.